Hi, so my name's Nick and I was recently diagnosed with autism, and I've spent the last couple of weeks working through how I think and feel about that and what this means for me as a person and how I can now move forward to live a more rewarding and authentic life, because I've spent a very, very long time hiding who I am, and doing that really takes its toll. So why did I seek a diagnosis at my age? Basically, did I think that I was perhaps autistic? Had other people suggested I might be? No, nobody ever thought I was autistic. I'm a female and I'm clearly very verbal, and nobody notices this or this or this as being odd. It's just Nick's quirky. And so I'm like, okay, quirky, fine. I had a lot of people most of my life who go, you're a weirdo, you're weird, we don't want to be friends with you. So I'm accustomed to rejection for being who I am. And like a lot of autistic females, we then really try and become what other people want us to be so we can fit in. But it doesn't work. And it comes with an enormous cost. And that's what had been happening to me. I lived by myself in isolation from the rest of the world because the rest of the world had not been kind to someone who was different. I've been called mad and crazy for so many years, and I'm not. I'm autistic. Autistic people are not mad. We are not crazy. We are not deranged. And we shouldn't be treated that way. So I think I'm decided to make this video to speak up for people like me and to maybe share my journey now that I'm learning why I'm a little bit different. So, like many women, I had received a previous misdiagnosis. Females with autism are often misdiagnosed as being bipolar or as having borderline personality disorder. And I guess from a psychiatrist's perspective, there are some common traits and there are some overlaps between these various conditions. And up until very recently, autism and ADHD were considered to affect males. So females who presented with some of these traits tended to be diagnosed with a psychiatric condition instead. Psychiatrists were traditionally trained to look for a psychiatric answer to what, I hate, the word I don't like to use, but abnormal behavior in females. Not abnormal in our world, are we? So from where I sat years ago, I got my initial diagnosis. To me, psychiatrists were these godlike beings who asked a lot of questions about childhood, about trauma and relationships. And I would dutifully answer these questions. But at the same time, I'd always wonder, why are they not asking me the important things, the relevant things about me? And why they never questioned anything that matched my experience of life, my experience of the world around me. There were never any questions like that. I would then be told what I was, sent off for treatment and suggestions for medication and lifestyle changes. Now, this happened to me twice, 2 occasions, like checklist. Right, you behave like this, okay, so your childhood was this, therefore you're that. It was very confusing to me. I didn't feel like they were talking to me. I was trying to fit me into a little box that wasn't me, but, well, they're professionals. They're supposed to know all the answers, aren't they? Now, none of their suggestions actually worked for me. Not only did it not make sense to me, it didn't work. And as for medication, the neurodiverse brain does not always cope well with those sorts of interventions, and mine did not. Now, a disclaimer, I am not a doctor and I'm not anti-medication or anything like that. Everybody is different and everybody reacts differently. So if, you just follow the advice of your medical professionals. Just in my personal circumstances, my brain's a bit sensitive to chemicals, to the point that I can't even take an anti-inflammatory without getting high and wanting really weird food cravings. And the world is really pretty and slow-mo and really quite wonderful on a single anti-inflammatory. So you can imagine if I have to take a psychiatric intervention, all manner of strange things happen. So my GP is going, I'm not prescribing you anything, ever. Doesn't work. So as an autistic person, trying to get back on track, please excuse, I do have ADHD as well, which does make it a little hard for me to stay focused. So as an autistic person, I have never, ever felt like I belong. In fact, from my point of view, I've always felt like I've landed here from another planet. Humans, and yes, I do call them humans. I call people humans. And something people have always, my ex-husbands would pull me up on, like, can you stop referring to us as humans? We are people. No, you are humans. On this planet, you are humans. Those are horses, those are dogs, you are humans. And what are you? Nick thing. I don't, and I have never, and this really probably sounds strange, but I haven't actually identified as human. Now, I don't think I'm an alien. I know I'm from here, but here's me, and there's the rest of the world. There's the rest of humanity, and this is a little box that I live in. And this lot doesn't make sense to me, and I don't make sense to them. This sense of difference has been really acute. I've spent my life believing I am wrong. I am out of place. I do not belong. I grew up feeling so different, so aware that my emotions or lack of emotions, because my emotions seem to be different to other people's. Sometimes I don't have emotions when I'm expected to have emotions. So I thought that perhaps somewhere along the line that one day I might something might explode out of me and I might turn into some sort of psychopath. Not that I ever wanted to murder anybody or harm anybody, but it was like, well, my experience of everything is so different to everybody else's. I'm wrong. And so apart from all the negative feedback I've always got from other people, I've always given myself a lot of negative self-talk too. And this is really unhealthy. And it's something I want to stop. Now that I understand and I'm learning about my differences, I can be a lot less harsh on myself. And I think, everybody should learn to be a lot less harsh on themselves anyway. I've always had enormous difficulty connecting with other people. I'd like to have friends, and there's people I'd like to be friends with, but I don't know how to do that. I cannot make small talk. I take things very literally. I do have, a handful of people that are my friends, but, they're male. I really don't know what to do with females. I'm not quite sure. I've still got to work out the whole gender question myself. I think there you go. If I don't identify as a human, how can I identify as a female? That's a question for another day. It's just, yeah, very difficult. So getting back on track, the initial diagnosis of a personality disorder actually gave me something to grab a hold of. I really needed to grab a hold of something. I was different, but personality disorder meant something. It meant that, okay, you're a human being, your personality is different, but you're still human. I'm like, oh, that's okay. I can be a borderline. So in what I now understand to be a completely autistic way of doing things, I threw myself completely into trying to be a borderline sufferer. I read everything I could. I bought all the books I could. I watched psychiatrists talking about it on YouTube. I decided that now that I was a something, I was a person, even if it was just slightly, not faulty, but a person with a condition, I was still a person and not a human. I was even a person at this point. I was obviously going to be worthwhile, because me by myself is absolutely not of any worth. So as a person with borderline, I was worth something, and that the onus was on me to try and help other people. So I decided the way to do this, being a person living by themselves, was obviously I'd have to reach out via the internet. So I taught myself how to build a website. I read everything I could, and I blogged prolifically. I joined social media groups and other online support groups for people with borderline personality disorder. But that didn't work. That was never going to work, because these people didn't understand me. And I understood them even less than I understood the rest of the human beings. That became a complete and utter disaster. The communication barrier was there more than it was with everybody else. And I had to come to terms with the fact that despite wanting them to be my tribe, they just weren't. I didn't have a tribe. I didn't belong anywhere. And this was deeply confusing, because I wasn't a normal human, and I didn't have a disorder that psychiatrists had told me I had. What was I? Where did I belong? What am I? It didn't, nothing made sense to me. Then one day I stumbled across this news article about autism in females and the common misdiagnosis of BPD. And I read this article, and this little light flickered on in the back of my mind, and I'm like, oh, okay. Where are some tests? I need to do some tests. I need to examine this. And I did some online tests, and the online tests were, you may be autistic. Make an appointment with your GP for referral. And I'm like, oh, I did. I actually started feeling excited, and there was like little happy, good feelings. I might belong. I might be again. This need for human connection. Yes, even autistic people need connection. And I didn't have that. Maybe this was the answer. Maybe I was autistic. It made sense from everything I read. But my GP said no. She said, no, you can't possibly be autistic. You're good at making eye contact. Anyone else have this problem? You're good at making eye contact? And from what I've read, that's one thing females on the spectrum can actually do quite well. Even we're not actually totally making eye contact, we're looking somewhere really, really close, giving the impression we're making eye contact. We are good at it. We learn how to do that. And I know I can do that quite well. But in my case, it's because I was forced to as a child. I was told that if you don't look me in the eye, you're being sneaky, you're being dishonest. And so I learned that eye contact with humans was not negotiable. In fact, I have the opposite problem. I try overly hard in a face-to-face situation, and I stare intently at people and freak them out. People are always saying, can you please stop doing that? Don't stare at me like that. Why are you staring? It's freaky. Okay, we're back to being freaky and weird again. I don't mean to be freaky and weird. I'm being interested in you. No, you're following me around and staring. It's weird. Okay. So how do you show that you're interested in a person if you don't stare at them and follow them? Apparently, yeah, I scored really, really, really badly on the social scale. I can talk to you now because you're the other side of the camera. Yeah, it would be no chance in real life. So when my GP said, no, you can't be, I was really disappointed. And I didn't have the words or the confidence to challenge her and say, but I really think I am. I've done some tests and I really think I am. Because I held her in really high regard. She was a really lovely person and she was a doctor and she was smart and I respected her and she was a medical professional, and medical professionals are right, aren't they? That's their job, not me. Why does me as a person Google something on the internet and decide, well, that's what I must be? And then the medical professionals go, no, no, no. Obviously, I have to listen to what they say. Now, that was 5 years ago, and the sense of loneliness and isolation that I've always felt increased tenfold. And since then, I've withdrawn further and further into myself, and I've deliberately isolated from the pain of the outside world. I have not worked for 5 years, and I very rarely leave the house, and I have a very small radius where I go to and what I do. And it doesn't involve humans, it involves nature. Not humans. Humans don't like me. Humans hurt me. I isolate. This has to change. And this diagnosis hopefully will change this. I'm going to find a way through this. With autism comes an array of anxiety issues, lots of anxious feelings, and my anxiety increased to a completely debilitating level. I ended up so many times in emergency departments with panic attacks, anxiety attacks, just completely falling apart, completely melting down and unable to cope with everything. Now I understand what's been happening to me, but I didn't then. Strangely, one of the benefits of COVID and people working from home and homeschooling has been a greater identification of neurodiverse issues, particularly ADHD, amongst adults. And so when I went to my GP saying, I can't cope anymore, this anxiety and everything, the world is too much, help me, she's gone, okay, medications haven't worked for you. There's something different about you. Let's do a quick test. Ask me a serious question. Okay, maybe you have ADHD. Here's a referral letter. Go and see this psychiatrist. Okay, off I toddle, see a psychiatrist. Sure enough, yes, I have ADHD. But in his report, he said, yes, this patient has ADHD, but I also have a very strong suspicion that she's on the autism spectrum, and I highly recommend that she goes and gets assessed for autism spectrum disorder. Borrowed money because I haven't worked in 5 years, and there's an 18-month waiting list in the public system to try and get help. So I went and had a formal and protracted and expensive because these things are not easy, assessment, and yeah, the results were, I am autistic. I am autistic. And yes, I am saying this now with a smile on my face, and I am a little bit animated, and my ADHD me is feeling quite animated about this whole thing too, so excuse that. But I'm autistic, and I'm saying it with a smile because that means I am a human after all. I am not an alien dropped randomly from outer space. I am valid. I am a valid person. I'm real, and I have just as much worth as anybody else. And that feeling is amazing. I am okay. I'm worthwhile. I matter. And after almost 60 years of not belonging, not understanding what I am, not having any sense of self-worth, and fearing that I might become some sort of monster one day if I let myself out a bit to be myself, and struggling with all this pain and confusion of trying to constantly contort myself to fit into some mold of normality, hoping to one day have friends and be a part of something and never being able to, this diagnosis is actually so freeing. I am me. I am not Nick Thing. I'm just Nick. And Nick is okay. Nick is an authentic person. I'm autistic, but that's okay. And now I want to find out who I am. What makes me real? What makes me happy? And of all these little tiny complicated mixed up parts that are locked inside, which ones are the authentic me? Which ones are the bits of me that I can discard that other people tried to make me? And do I have the courage to let those little parts of real me come out? I've survived everything else life has thrown at me. So I'm willing to try and survive the journey of becoming the person that I was always supposed to be, rather than the person the world has tried to make me into, which isn't me. And this is my first internet babble, and it's a really scary thing to do, so I probably have waffled on far too much, but if anybody else out there understands any of this, if you can identify with any of this, please let me know. You know, I'm quite sure I'm not the only one out there that is like this. So